The handcuffs clicked shut, echoing louder than the sirens in the silent, humid air. Officer Brody Miller thought he had just taken down an arrogant criminal. He thought the uniform in her back seat was a costume. He thought the heavy gold star on her ID was a prop. He was wrong, dead wrong. The woman he just slammed against the hood of a 1967 Shelby Mustang wasn't a criminal. She was Lieutenant General Althea Dubois, the highest-ranking logistics commander in the U.S. Army, and she was on her way to a classified briefing with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. In exactly 45 minutes, Officer Miller's career wouldn't just be over, it would be incinerated by a single phone call that would shake the Pentagon. This is the story of how arrogance met absolute power. The heat in southern Georgia was a physical weight, a wet blanket that smelled of pine needles and asphalt melting under the midday sun. It was 1:15 p.m. on a Tuesday. Lieutenant General Althea Dubois adjusted the rearview mirror of her pristine, cherry-red 1967 Shelby GT 500. She wasn't in uniform. Today, she was technically on leave, driving from a family reunion in Savannah back to Fort Stewart before catching a hop to D.C. for a briefing that could determine the budget of the entire Eastern Seaboard's defense grid. She wore a crisp white linen shirt, tailored navy slacks, and oversized sunglasses that hid eyes known in the Pentagon for stripping colonels of their confidence with a single glance. At 52, Althea moved with a lethal grace. She was a black woman who had climbed the ranks when the ladder was greased with prejudice, and she had smashed every glass ceiling they built. She checked her speedometer. 55 in a 55. Precision was a habit, not a choice. Route 9 outside the sleepy town of Oak Creek was notorious. It was a speed trap designed to bleed tourists and soldiers dry, funding the bloated budget of a police department that had more tactical gear than common sense. Althea saw the cruiser before he saw her. A black Dodge Charger, hidden behind a billboard advertising divorce lawyers. As she passed, the engine roared to life. The lights flickered on, blue and red, spinning violently. "Here we go," she whispered, her voice calm. She signaled, slowed down gradually, and pulled onto the gravel shoulder, making sure to keep her hands visible at the top of the steering wheel. In the rearview mirror, she watched the officer approach. He was young, maybe 25, with a high and tight haircut that screamed rejected military applicant. He walked with a swagger that hadn't been earned, his hand resting aggressively on his holster. This was Officer Brody Miller. He didn't come to the window. He stopped at the rear pillar, a tactical maneuver to keep the driver off balance. Althea lowered the passenger window and then her own. "License and registration," Miller barked, not bothering with a greeting. "Good afternoon, officer," Althea said, her voice steady. "May I ask the reason for the stop?" "I said license and registration. Do not make me ask you a third time." Miller's face was flushed, sweat beading under the brim of his hat. He leaned down, peering into the car, his eyes scanning the interior. They lingered on the expensive leather seats, the high-end dashboard, and finally, the folded Army service uniform hanging in the back, with the 3 silver stars on the shoulder boards clearly visible. "Is that a costume back there?" Miller sneered. Althea blinked slowly. "That is my uniform, officer." "Step out of the car." "Officer, I am complying with your request for identification. It is in my purse on the passenger seat. I am going to reach for it now." "I said step out of the car," Miller shouted, his hand unsnapping the retention strap of his service weapon. "You people always have an excuse. Get out, now." Althea's internal alarm bells began to ring. "You people." The code was cracked. This wasn't a traffic stop. It was a power play. "I am unbuckling my seatbelt," she narrated her movements, a survival tactic she had taught her own son. "I am opening the door." She stepped out into the oppressive heat. She stood 5'9", but her posture made her look 6 feet tall. She looked Officer Miller directly in the eyes. "Turn around, hands on the hood, spread your legs," Miller commanded. Officer, this is unnecessary. I am a Lieutenant General in the United States Army. My identification is in the vehicle. If you check it, I don't care if you're the Queen of England. You swerved, you look intoxicated, and I suspect you of carrying stolen government property. Stolen property? Althea asked, her brow furrowing. That uniform. Stolen valor is a crime in this state, lady. And driving a car like this, on a government salary? Yeah, right. Who's the dealer? Who do you work for? Althea felt a cold rage settle in her stomach. It was a familiar feeling, one she usually reserved for incompetent contractors or insubordinate majors. But here, on the side of a dusty road, with a man barely old enough to shave holding a gun to her hip, it was dangerous. My name is Dr. Althea Dubois. I am the Deputy Commanding General of— Shut up! Miller shoved her. The force was sudden. Althea stumbled forward, her hip colliding with the hot metal of the Mustang. You are making a mistake, she said, her voice dropping an octave. It was the voice she used before firing people. The only mistake was you driving through my town, Miller spat. He grabbed her left wrist and twisted it behind her back, forcing the cuff on with a painful click. At that moment, a second cruiser kicked up dust as it screeched to a halt behind them. Sergeant Clint Cowboy Harrison stepped out. He was older, heavy-set, chewing on a toothpick, wearing sunglasses that cost $5 at a gas station. What we got, Miller? Harrison called out, hitching his belt up. Resisting arrest, Sarge. Possible DUI, and definitely stolen valor. Caught her with a general's uniform in the back. Says she's a doctor. Harrison laughed, a wet hacking sound. He walked over, looking Althea up and down as she stood handcuffed against her own car. A general, huh? Harrison smirked, leaning in close enough for Althea to smell the stale tobacco on his breath. You know, my daddy was in Nam. I know what a general looks like. And sweetheart, you ain't it. Althea felt the metal of the handcuffs digging into her radial nerve. She didn't flinch. She entered a state of operational detachments, the same mindset she used during the Baghdad extraction coordination in 2004. Sergeant, Althea said, shifting her gaze to Harrison, I strongly suggest you check my wallet on the passenger seat. Inside is a common access card. It will verify my rank and clearance level. If you continue this detainment without verification, you are violating federal protocols regarding the detention of senior military officers. Harrison picked his teeth with the toothpick. You hear that, Miller? She speaks fancy. Protocols. She was reaching for something, Sarge, Miller lied effortlessly. I feared for my safety. Check the car, Miller. Tear it apart. Let's see what she's really hiding. You do not have consent to search my vehicle, Althea stated firmly. I do not consent. Probable cause, lady, Harrison said, tapping the hood. We smell marijuana. There was no marijuana. The car smelled of new leather and Althea's Chanel No. 5. Althea watched helplessly as Miller dove into her car. He threw her purse onto the asphalt, spilling its contents. Her lipstick, her phone, and her wallet tumbled into the dirt. He ripped the glove box open, tossing the owner's manual over his shoulder. Then he grabbed the uniform. Althea's heart skipped a beat. That uniform was prepared for the Pentagon. It was immaculate. Miller pulled it off the hanger, bunching the fabric in his fist. He threw it on the dusty trunk of the Charger. Hey! Althea snapped, breaking her composure for the first time. That is a United States Army uniform. Treat it with respect. It's a prop, Miller muttered. He dug into the pockets of the uniform jacket, looking for drugs. This is insane, Althea said. Look at the wallet in the dirt. Pick it up. Harrison sighed, acting as if it were a great burden. He bent down and scooped up the leather wallet. He flipped it open. He froze. The ID wasn't a standard driver's license. It was a vertically oriented Department of Defense Common Access card with a gold chip. Below the photo of a stern-faced Althea, it read, Dubois, Althea. Rank, Lieutenant General. Pay grade, 09. Behind it was another card, a diplomatic passport. Harrison squinted at the card, then at Althea. The sun glared off the 3 stars on the ID photo. "It's a good fake," Harrison said, but his voice lacked the earlier conviction. He looked at Miller. "Looks real technical." "I can print that at Kinko's, Sarge," Miller called out from the back seat of the Mustang. "I'm telling you, she's a runner. Probably moving product for the cartels. They use women like this to fly under the radar." "Check the plates again," Harrison ordered. "I did. No record." "Because it's a government vehicle masked for security, you idiots," Althea hissed. "It is registered to the Department of the Army." Harrison looked at the card again. He felt a prickle of doubt, a cold sweat starting on the back of his neck. But in Oak Creek, you didn't back down. If you backed down, you admitted you were wrong. And if you admitted you were wrong to a black woman driving a Shelby, the boys at the station would never let you live it down. He had to double down. "Fake ID," Harrison declared, shoving the wallet into his own pocket. "That's a felony, forging government documents." He grabbed Althea's arm, spinning her around roughly. "You're under arrest. Miller, get her in the back. We'll sort this out at the station." "I demand a phone call," Althea said, struggling against the grip. "I need to contact my chain of command." "You can make a call when we book you," Miller said, grabbing her other arm and dragging her toward the charger. "You are making a catastrophic error," Althea said, her voice turning icy cold. "Officer Miller, Sergeant Harrison, I am memorizing your names. I am memorizing your badge numbers, and I promise you, by sunset, you will wish you had never been born." Miller laughed. He actually laughed. "Get in the car, lady." He shoved her into the back of the Dodge Charger. The plastic seat was hard and hot. The cage separated her from the air conditioning. It smelled of vomit and disinfectant. As Miller slammed the door, Althea saw something out of the corner of her eye. About 50 yards away, near the entrance to a gas station, a young woman with pink hair was holding up a smartphone. She was recording. Althea took a deep breath. Good, she thought. The world is watching. Miller got into the driver's seat. Harrison got into the passenger side. "What do we do with the Mustang?" Miller asked. "Tow it," Harrison said. "Impound. Tell Jimmy to take his time logging it. If she is a runner, we might find cash in the panels." Althea sat in the back, her wrists throbbing. She closed her eyes and began to count. She needed to remain calm. She needed to think. She needed a phone. They drove for 20 minutes in silence, the radio crackling occasionally with dispatch chatter. Althea didn't speak. She was formulating a strategy. This was no longer a traffic stop. It was a hostage situation. When they arrived at the Oak Creek police station, a brick building that looked like a fortified bunker, Miller hauled her out. He paraded her through the front desk area. The desk sergeant, a woman named Deborah who had been there for 30 years, looked up over her glasses. "What you got, cowboy?" "Identify theft. Stolen valor. Maybe drug trafficking," Harrison said loudly, puffing his chest out. Deborah looked at Althea. She looked at the tailored clothes, the expensive haircut, the way Althea held her head high despite the handcuffs. Deborah frowned. She had seen drug runners. She had seen criminals. This woman looked like authority. "Book her," Harrison said. "Put her in holding cell 2, the hot one." "I want my phone call," Althea demanded. "Now." "Processing first," Miller said, pushing her toward the booking desk. They took her fingerprints. They took her mugshot. Althea stared into the camera lens with a look that would later be described by the media as the gaze of judgment. Finally, after 45 minutes of deliberate stalling, they led her to a cell. They uncuffed her. "Phone," Althea said, extending her hand. Harrison rolled his eyes. He motioned to a payphone on the wall of the booking room. "Local calls only. You got 3 minutes." Althea didn't move toward the payphone. "I need my cell phone. It has secure contacts." "No cell phones in the holding area," Miller said. Then dial the number I give you, Althea said. It is a Washington, D.C. area code, 202. I told you, local calls only, Harrison said, getting impatient. Althea stepped close to the bars. Sergeant, listen to me very carefully. If you do not let me make this call, the military police will not just come for me. They will come for this entire building. I am due for a briefing with General Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, in less than 2 hours. If I am not there and if I do not check in, they will ping my phone. They will find it here, and they will assume I have been kidnapped by hostiles. Harrison stared at her. The specific name drop, General Milley, landed. Everyone knew that name. You're bluffing, Miller scoffed. Give her the damn phone, Deborah said from the desk. She stood up. I don't like this, Clint. She ain't acting like a junkie. Give her the phone. Harrison hesitated. He looked at the ID card still in his hand. Lieutenant General, fine, Harrison grunted. He walked over to the property bag, pulled out her sleek black government-issued smartphone, and handed it to her through the bars. One call. Put it on speaker. No funny business. Althea took the phone. Her hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline, but her fingers were precise. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't call her husband. She dialed a speed dial number. *7 Alpha. The phone rang once. Pentagon secure switchboard. Identify. A crisp voice answered. Priority 1 Alpha. Lieutenant General Althea Dubois. Authentication code. Zulu X-ray 904. Patch me through to the chairman's office. Immediate. Harrison's jaw went slack. Miller stopped chewing his gum. Authentication confirmed, General Dubois. Stand by for the chairman. There was a click, a brief hum of static, and then a gruff, familiar voice filled the small police station booking room. Althea, I'm staring at an empty chair. Where the hell are you? The briefing started 5 minutes ago. Althea looked directly at Sergeant Harrison, her eyes burning with vindication. General Milley, she said, her voice clear and loud. I am currently being held against my will by the Oak Creek Police Department in Georgia. I have been assaulted, handcuffed, and accused of stolen valor by Officer Brody Miller and Sergeant Clint Harrison. They have seized my vehicle and my service uniform. I am requesting immediate federal intervention. There was a silence on the line, so profound, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Then, the voice on the other end dropped to a dangerous whisper. Say that again, Althea. I am in a cage, sir. In Oak Creek, Georgia. Stay on the line, the chairman said. Do not hang up. Then, they heard the chairman shouting to someone in the background. Get me the JSOC commander. Get me the FBI director. And get the governor of Georgia on the line now. Harrison's face turned the color of ash. He looked at the phone, then at Althea, then at Miller. Oh, shit, Miller whispered. The silence in the booking room was suffocating. It was broken only by the heavy, erratic breathing of Sergeant Harrison. On the speakerphone, the line to the Pentagon was still open, but the chaotic shouting had been replaced by a rhythmic, terrifying sound, the clatter of keyboards. Someone on the other end was logging coordinates with lethal precision. Ma'am! Harrison started, his voice trembling, the toothpick falling from his mouth. General, if this is a misunderstanding, we can… Quiet, Althea commanded. She didn't even look at him. She stared at the analog clock on the wall, watching the second hand sweep past the 12. Suddenly, the phone crackled. Althea, this is Colonel Linder from the Judge Advocate General's Corps. I'm patching in the Provost Marshal. We have your location. Are you injured? Minor bruising on the wrists and hip. Nothing broken, Colonel, Althea replied, her voice steady as a surgeon's hand. But my dignity is currently in a holding cell. Understood. ETA for the advance team is 12 minutes. Fort Stewart has scrambled a reaction force. The FBI field office in Atlanta is airborne. General, the chairman has ordered a full lockdown of that facility. Do not let them touch you again." "Copy that." Harrison looked at Miller. The young officer looked like he was going to vomit. "Sarge, what do we do? Reaction force? Is he talking about the army?" "Shut up, Miller," Harrison hissed. He looked at the desk sergeant, Deborah. She was already on the landline, her face the color of ash. "Chief?" Deborah whispered into the receiver. "You need to get down here now." "No, I can't explain. I think the army is invading us." 10 minutes passed. It felt like 10 years. Then, the stale coffee in the mug on Deborah's desk began to ripple. A low thrumming sound began to vibrate the windows. It grew louder. A deep, chest-thumping whoop, whoop, whoop that shook the dust from the acoustic ceiling tiles. The fluorescent lights flickered. "What is that?" Miller asked, backing away from the door, his hand hovering uselessly over his gun. Althea smiled, a cold, shark-like smile. "That, Officer Miller, is the sound of consequences." Outside, the sleepy town of Oak Creek was waking up to a nightmare. 2 UH-60. Black Hawk helicopters, painted in matte black, roared over the main street, flying so low that shingles rattled on the roofs of the antique shops. They hovered directly over the police station parking lot, kicking up a blinding storm of sand, gravel, and regret. Simultaneously, a convoy of 4 black Chevy Suburbans with government plates screeched around the corner, jumping the curb to flank the entrance. They didn't park. They established a kill box. The front door of the station burst open with a crash that shattered the glass. It wasn't the chief of police. It was a team of 6 men in full tactical gear, wearing vests emblazoned with FBI and MP. They moved with a fluidity and violence of action that made Officer Miller's earlier swagger look like a child playing dress-up. "Federal agents. Hands where we can see them. Now!" Miller and Harrison threw their hands up so fast, Miller nearly dislocated his shoulder. "Don't shoot!" Harrison screamed, his voice cracking. "We're police! We're police!" "On your knees! Face the wall!" The lead agent, a giant of a man, didn't hesitate. He kicked Miller's legs apart, forcing him down to the linoleum. Behind the tactical team walked a man in a pristine army service uniform, the green stripes on his sleeves indicating a command sergeant major. He was followed by a woman in a sharp grey suit carrying a briefcase. The sergeant major scanned the room, ignoring the cowering police officers. His eyes locked onto the holding cell. He saw the 3 stars on the ID card lying on the booking desk. He saw Althea standing behind the bars. He marched over, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Unlock this door!" he barked at Deborah. Deborah, shaking so hard she dropped the keys twice, finally managed to unlock the cell. The clang of the door opening was the sweetest sound Althea had ever heard. Althea stepped out. She rubbed her wrists, where the red marks of the cuffs were starting to bruise. The sergeant major snapped to attention and rendered a salute so crisp it cut the air. "General Dubois, Command Sergeant Major Hayes, 3rd Infantry Division. Ma'am, on behalf of the Army, I apologize." Althea returned the salute slowly. "At ease, Sergeant Major. It's good to see you." "Are these the men?" Hayes asked, turning slowly to look at Harrison and Miller, who were currently kneeling on the floor with FBI agents zip-tying their hands behind their backs. "Those are the men," Althea confirmed. "Officer Miller assaulted me. Sergeant Harrison supervised the violation of my civil rights and destroyed the chain of custody for classified materials." The woman in the grey suit stepped forward. "General, I'm Special Agent Kinsley, FBI Public Corruption Unit. We've been authorized by the DOJ to take jurisdiction over this scene. We are seizing all surveillance footage, body cam data, and physical logs." Just then, the back door burst open and a fat, balding man in a rumpled shirt ran in. It was Chief of Police Roy Gantry. "What the hell is going on here?" Gantry shouted, red-faced. "You can't just storm my station. This is Oak Creek. I want to see a warrant." Special Agent Kinsley turned to him, holding up a piece of paper stamped with the seal of a federal judge. "Warrant signed 5 minutes ago by the District Court in Atlanta, Chief. We are investigating a conspiracy to deprive a federal officer of their rights, kidnapping, and potential racketeering. And given what we know about Route 9 speed traps, I suggest you shut your mouth before you add obstruction of justice to the list." Gantry froze. He looked at Althea. He saw the stars. He looked at the black hawks hovering outside the window. "You arrested a general," Gantry whispered to Harrison, his voice barely audible. You morons arrested a 3-star general?" She looked like a drug dealer, Chief," Miller blubbered from the floor. Althea walked over to Miller. She stood over him, looking down with eyes that had seen war zones. "Officer Miller," she said softly, "you said I looked like a drug dealer. You said my uniform was a costume. You said I couldn't possibly afford my car." She leaned in close. "That car was a gift from my husband for our 25th anniversary. He died in Afghanistan 2 years ago. He was a general too. And that uniform? I wore it to his funeral. You didn't just disrespect me. You disrespected every soldier who ever wore the cloth." Miller couldn't meet her eyes. He stared at the floor, tears streaming down his face. "Get them out of my sight," Althea said, turning away. While the FBI was tearing the police station apart, searching for the lost body cam footage that Harrison had tried to delete moments before the breach, a different kind of war was breaking out online. The girl with the pink hair at the gas station? Her name was Chloe, and she was a streamer with 200,000 followers on TikTok. She had uploaded the video of the arrest with the caption, "Small town cops assault Black Army general? This is insane. #Oak Creek, #police brutality, #army. By the time Althea was escorted out of the station and into the back of a waiting Suburban, the video had 4 million views. It had reached Twitter. It had reached CNN. It had reached the White House press secretary's desk. The video clearly showed Althea complying. It showed Miller shoving her against the hot hood of the Mustang. It showed the uniform being thrown onto the trunk like a dirty rag. As Althea sat in the air-conditioned SUV, a medic checking her vitals, her phone buzzed. It was her son, David, a corporate lawyer in New York. "Mum, are you okay? I just saw it. I'm looking at the video right now. Mum, I'm going to fly down there and sue them until the town ceases to exist. I'm fine, David. The situation is handled." Handled? Mom, #Fire Miller is trending #1 globally. People are digging up this guy's past. Did you know he was fired from a mall security job for excessive force? And Harrison? The internet found his Facebook page. It's not good, Mum. He's got posts bragging about taxing out-of-towners. Althea sighed, rubbing her temple. "I need to get to DC, David. I have a job to do." "You're not going to DC yet," David said. "I just got off the phone with your aide. The chairman wants a press conference. He wants to use this. They want to make an example out of Oak Creek." Althea looked out the window. Outside the police station, a crowd was forming. Locals, seeing the helicopters, had gathered. But as news of the video spread, the mood of the crowd shifted. They weren't there to support the police. They were there to witness their downfall. For years, the people of Oak Creek had been harassed by Miller and Harrison. They had paid the bogus tickets. They had been intimidated. Now, seeing the feds dragging computers out of the station, they sensed blood in the water. Special Agent Kinsley opened the car door. "General, we found something you need to see, in Miller's locker." Althea stepped out. Kinsley held up an evidence bag. Inside were jewelry, expensive watches, and rolls of cash. "Trophies," Kinsley said grimly. "From other stops. It looks like they've been robbing tourists for years, pocketing the cash, planting drugs if they complained. You weren't a random stop, General. You were just the first one who fought back." Althea felt a wave of nausea. "How many?" "We don't know yet. But Chief Gantry's safe has a ledger. It looks like the whole department was running a roadside piracy ring." Just then, a sleek black sedan pulled up. A man in a sharp suit stepped out, the governor of Georgia. He looked terrified. He beelined for Althea, bypassing the chief entirely. "General Dubois," the governor stammered, offering a hand that Althea ignored. I am mortified. This is not who we are. I've already suspended the chief and ordered a state inquiry." Althea looked at the governor, then at the camera crews setting up behind the yellow police tape. "Governor," she said, her voice loud enough for the reporters to hear, "you allowed this. These men didn't operate in a vacuum. They had badges you issued. They used a court system you oversee. Do not apologize to me. Apologize to the citizens of this town who have been living under a gang with badges." She turned to Agent Kinsley. "I want my car back, and I want my uniform cleaned." "Your car is being retrieved from the impound now, General. We're having it detailed. And I believe the Sergeant Major has already sent your uniform to the base cleaners for an emergency press." "Good," Althea said. "Then I'm ready to make a statement." She walked toward the cluster of microphones. The crowd went silent. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a conqueror. She adjusted her cuffs, though she wasn't wearing the uniform yet. The phantom weight of the handcuffs was still there, fueling her. "My name is Lieutenant General Althea Dubois," she began, looking directly into the CNN camera lens. "Today, I was reminded that for some, a badge is a license to hate. But I am here to remind those people of something else." She paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the humid air. "The oath I swore to the Constitution includes enemies foreign and domestic. And today, I met the domestic kind." The interrogation room at the FBI field office in Atlanta was starkly different from the one in Oak Creek. There were no stained coffee cups, no flickering lights, and definitely no good old boy camaraderie. The walls were soundproofed acoustic foam, the table was bolted to the floor, and the air was recycled and cold. Sergeant Clint Cowboy Harrison sat on one side of the metal table. He wasn't wearing his sunglasses anymore. He wasn't chewing a toothpick. He looked smaller, deflated, like a balloon that had lost its air. Across from him sat Special Agent Kinsley and a formidable man named Colonel Linder from the Army's Criminal Investigation Division, CID. "I want a deal," Harrison said, his voice raspy. "I know how this works. I give you the big fish, you let the little fish swim." Agent Kinsley didn't blink. She opened a thick file folder and slid a photo across the table. It was a picture of the blue ledger they had pulled from Chief Gantry's safe. "We don't need you to give us the big fish, Clint," Kinsley said, her voice dangerously calm. "We already have the ledger. We have the dates, the amounts, and the initials of every officer who took a cut of the seized cash. We know about the tourist tax. We know about the planted evidence in the 2018 Barker case. We know everything." Harrison's face went pale. "Then what do you want?" "We want the narrative," Colonel Linder interjected. "We want to know why you thought you could target a 3-star general. Was she targeted specifically? Or are you just that incompetent?" Harrison looked down at his hands. We didn't know who she was. Miller. Miller is an idiot. He saw the car. We have a profile, okay? Expensive cars, out-of-state plates, solo drivers. Usually they pay the fine and leave. They don't fight back." "And the uniform?" Linda pressed. "You saw the stars. You saw the ID." "I thought it was fake," Harrison snapped, sweat beading on his forehead. "You don't understand. In Oak Creek, the law is what we say it is. We didn't think anyone would come for her. We didn't think the Army would send helicopters." "That is the arrogance that ends careers," Linda said. "You didn't just break the law, Sergeant. You threatened national security. General Dubois was carrying classified logistical data for the Eastern Seaboard Defense Grid. By seizing her vehicle and her person, you technically committed an act of domestic terrorism." Harrison choked. "Terrorism? I'm a cop." "You were a gang member with a badge," Kinsley corrected. "And right now, you're looking at 20 years for deprivation of rights under colour of law, plus another 10 for the racketeering charges we are filing against the department. Unless..." Harrison looked up, desperate hope in his eyes. "Unless what?" Unless you testify against Chief Gantry, and unless you admit on record that Brody Miller falsified the police report regarding the general's resistance. I'll do it, Harrison said instantly. Miller is a loose cannon. I told him to cool it. I'll give you everything. Meanwhile, in the adjacent interrogation room, Officer Brody Miller was weeping. He wasn't negotiating. He was disintegrating. I just wanted to be a good cop, Miller sobbed. The chief, he said if I didn't get my seizure numbers up, I'd be back on mall security. I needed the seizures. The Mustang looked like a jackpot. General Althea Dubois watched the interrogation from behind the one-way mirror. She stood with her arms crossed, her face unreadable. Pathetic, she whispered. Standing next to her was her son Marcus, who had flown in from New York. He looked at his mother. They're just bullies, Mom. Take away the badge, and there's nothing left. There is something left, Althea said, turning to walk away. The damage they caused. We need to make sure they can never do this again. Not to a general, and not to a janitor. The investigation didn't stop at the police station. The FBI raided the home of the local judge who had been signing the bogus warrants for the asset forfeitures. They found a safety deposit box key hidden in a hollowed-out Bible. The corruption went all the way to the county courthouse. For 3 weeks, Oak Creek was under siege, not by the military but by auditors. Every ticket written in the last 5 years was reviewed. Every arrest was scrutinized. The Blue Ledger revealed that the department had stolen over $4 million from motorists over a decade. They had ruined lives, confiscated college funds, and seized cars that were never returned. And it all ended because they stopped the wrong black woman on a Tuesday afternoon. The trial of United States versus Miller, Harrison, and Gantry was held in the Federal District Court in Atlanta to avoid jury bias. The courtroom was packed. National media outlets were camped outside. The courtroom sketches would feature Althea's sharp profile, again and again. Althea chose to wear her dress blues for her testimony. She wore her ribbon rack, a colourful testament to 30 years of service. Bronze stars, legions of merit, campaign medals from the desert to the mountains. When she walked to the witness stand, the room went silent. The contrast was stark. The impeccably disciplined general versus the 3 disheveled former officers sitting at the defense table in orange jumpsuits. The defense attorney for Chief Gantry, a slick lawyer named Mr. Thorne, tried the only tactic he had: character assassination. General Dubois, Thorne said, pacing in front of the jury, you stated that Officer Miller was aggressive, but isn't it true that you were speeding? I was traveling 55 in a 55 zone, Counselor, Althea said, her voice projecting to the back of the room without a microphone. My vehicle has a GPS data logger installed by the Department of Defense. The logs have been submitted into evidence. I was not speeding. Thorne frowned. He hadn't read the technical specs of the evidence. He pivoted. You admit you were frustrated. You are a powerful woman. You're used to getting your way. Isn't it possible that you escalated the situation, that you used your rank to intimidate these simple country officers? Althea turned her head slowly to look at the jury. Then she looked back at Thorne. Counselor, I have negotiated with warlords in Kandahar. I have briefed the President of the United States in the Situation Room. I do not need to intimidate a traffic officer to feel powerful. I offered my identification. I narrated my movements. I followed every protocol designed to keep black citizens alive during traffic stops. The escalation came entirely from the men sitting at that table. But, and let me be clear, Althea interrupted, her voice gaining a steely edge. I did not use my rank to escape a ticket. I used my rank to survive an assault. If I had been a civilian woman with no connections, no star on my shoulder, and no tracking device in my car, would we be here today? Or would I be just another resisting arrest statistic in Sergeant Harrison's ledger? Objection from the defense table. But it didn't matter. The jury had heard it. The truth hung in the air like smoke. The most damning evidence, however, wasn't the testimony. It was the recovered audio from Officer Miller's body cam. Harrison had tried to delete the video, but he didn't know that the new body cams had a pre-record buffer and a backup drive. The FBI forensic team had recovered it all. The prosecutor played the clip for the court. Audio crackle. Miller: "Is that a costume back there?" Miller: "You people always have an excuse." The sound of the slam against the hood. Harrison: "I know what a general looks like, and sweetheart, you ain't it." The jury flinched at the sound of the impact. They looked at Althea, sitting tall and dignified. Then they looked at Harrison, who was staring at the table, his face a mask of shame. The real-life twist came during the sentencing phase. Brody Miller, the young officer who started it all, broke protocol again. Before the judge could read the sentence, Miller stood up. "Sit down," his lawyer hissed. "No," Miller said, his voice shaking. He turned to Althea in the gallery. "General, I was scared. Not of you, of them." He pointed at Harrison and Gantry. "They told me if I didn't bring in a seizure that day, they'd fire me. I have a baby daughter. I wanted to keep my job. I'm sorry." It was a moment of pathetic human weakness. It didn't excuse what he did, but it exposed the rot of the system. Judge Evelyn Carter, a stern woman known for harsh sentences, looked over her glasses. "Mr. Miller, fear for your job is not a license to violate the Constitution. You swore an oath to the law, not to your payroll." The gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot. The sentences: Chief Roy Gantry, 25 years in federal prison for racketeering, conspiracy, and wire fraud. Sergeant Clint Cowboy Harrison, 18 years for deprivation of rights and destruction of evidence. Officer Brody Miller, 8 years. The judge showed slight leniency due to his cooperation and confession, but the message was clear. Just following orders is not a defense. As the bailiffs led the men away, the clinking of their shackles echoed in the courtroom. It was the same sound Althea had heard that day on the roadside. But now, the rhythm was different. It was the rhythm of justice. Althea walked out of the courthouse and into a sea of cameras. "General! General! Do you feel vindicated?" a reporter shouted. Althea stopped. She looked at the cameras. "Vindication is personal," she said. "This isn't about me. This is about the fact that it took the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to stop a bad traffic stop. That is not a victory. That is a warning. We have work to do." She walked to her car, the Shelby GT500, now fully detailed and gleaming. She got in, put on her sunglasses, and drove away. But the story didn't end in the courtroom. The hard karma continued. In the months that followed, the state of Georgia passed the Dubois Act, a piece of legislation that mandated independent oversight for all asset forfeiture funds and required body cams to be live-streamed to a cloud server that officers couldn't delete. The Oak Creek Police Department was dissolved entirely. Policing duties for the town were handed over to the county sheriff, who hired a diverse force and implemented community policing standards. And Althea? She didn't retire. She was promoted. 4 months after the trial, she received her 4th star. General Althea Dubois became the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, with a new portfolio added to her duties, the Office of Institutional Integrity. She was now the one rewriting the rules. 6 months after the raid that shook the nation, the landscape of Oak Creek had changed, both physically and spiritually. The speed trap billboards on Route 9, once the primary source of revenue for the town, were gone. In their place stood simple signs welcoming visitors to a new beginning. The fortified police station had been gutted and repurposed into a community legal aid clinic and a library, funded entirely by the assets seized from the corrupt department. But for General Althea Dubois, the story wasn't quite finished. There was one loose end she needed to tie, not with a rope, but with a conversation. She drove the cherry-red Shelby GT 500 down Route 9 again. The engine purred. 428 cubic inches of American muscle that had been fully restored by the FBI forensics team before being returned to her. She wasn't rushing this time. She was cruising. She pulled onto the same gravel shoulder where Officer Brody Miller had slammed her against the hood. The dust was settled now. The ghosts of the confrontation were fading, replaced by the hum of cicadas in the pines. She got out of the car and walked to the edge of the road, near the tree line. She was meeting someone. A beat-up, rusted pickup truck pulled up slowly. A man in his 60s stepped out. He wore a faded flannel shirt, work boots covered in red clay, and a baseball cap that he immediately took off. He looked tired, worn down by a shame that wasn't entirely his own. It was Gary Miller, Brody Miller's father. He approached Althea slowly, holding his hat in his hands, his eyes fixed on the asphalt. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 6 months. "General," Gary said, his voice raspy and thick with emotion. "I didn't think you'd come." "You asked to see me, Mr. Miller," Althea said, keeping a respectful but guarded distance. "I make it a point to answer calls." Gary looked up, his eyes rimmed with red. I wanted to apologize, to your face, for my boy. I raised him better than that. Or I thought I did. I was a Marine general. Semper Fi. Vietnam, 71. I taught him to respect the uniform. I don't know where he went wrong." Althea looked at the father's pained face. She saw the tragedy that often gets lost in the headlines. Corruption didn't just destroy the victims, it destroyed the families of the perpetrators too. Brody Miller destroyed his own life, but he broke his father's heart. "He got caught up in a rotten system, Gary," Althea said gently. "Bad systems corrupt good people. Your son made choices, terrible, cowardly choices, and he is paying for them now." Brody Miller was currently serving the first year of his 8-year sentence in a federal penitentiary in Florida. "I visit him," Gary said, a tear tracing a path through the grime on his cheek. He's different, scared. He reads a lot now. He asked me to give you this." Gary reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a folded, crinkled piece of notebook paper. Althea took it. She unfolded the sheet. It was a drawing, a crude pencil sketch of a 1967 Shelby Mustang. And underneath, in shaky, block handwriting, "I'm sorry. You were right. It wasn't a costume." Althea stared at the note. It wasn't forgiveness. That was too big a word for this situation. But it was acknowledgement. It was a surrender. "Tell him I received it," Althea said, refolding the paper and placing it in her pocket. "And tell him that when he gets out, the world will be different. He will have to earn his place in it. But it's not impossible." Gary nodded, wiping his eyes. "Thank you, General. You didn't have to meet me. Most folks would have spit on me. I am a soldier, Mr. Miller. We don't spit on the wounded. We treat them." Althea turned and walked back to her car. She slid into the driver's seat, the leather warm against her back. As she put the car in gear, her mind drifted to the final tally of justice. The hard karma that the media loved to talk about. The aftermath. Chief Roy Gantry, sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for racketeering, conspiracy, and wire fraud. He would likely die behind bars. Sergeant Clint Cowboy. Harrison, 18 years for deprivation of rights and destruction of evidence. His wife divorced him the day of the sentencing. Judge Silas Prescott. The corrupt judge who signed the warrants was exposed by the Blue Ledger. He was disbarred and sentenced to 12 years for judicial misconduct and money laundering. The Victim Fund. The $4 million recovered from the scheme was returned to the victims. Families got their cars back. College funds were restored. And Althea? She didn't retire. The ordeal hadn't broken her. It had sharpened her. 4 months after the trial, she stood in the Oval Office. the President of the United States pinned a fourth star on her shoulder. General Althea Dubois was named the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, with a new, special portfolio added to her duties, the Office of Institutional Integrity. She was now the one rewriting the rules. She checked her mirrors. The road ahead was clear. No traps, no flashing lights in the rear view. Just the open highway and the promise of the future. She punched the accelerator. The Mustang roared, tires biting the asphalt, launching her forward. She wasn't running from anything anymore. She was driving toward everything. General Althea Dubois drove on, a guardian of the road, leaving the dust of Oak Creek in her rearview mirror. Forever. And that is how one traffic stop dismantled an entire corrupt empire. General Dubois proved that true power isn't about the badge on your chest or the gun on your hip. It's about integrity, composure, and the unshakable will to stand your ground. Officer Miller and Sergeant Harrison thought they were hunting a rabbit, but they woke up a lioness. They tried to break her, but all they did was break themselves against her resolve. If this story fired you up, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and tells YouTube you want more stories like this. Share this video with someone who needs to see justice served cold. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story of karma hitting back hard. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.